I don't want to put too much pressure on you, man. So we're jumping into today.
I'm already wearing a V-neck. I'm already putting myself out there like that.
the V-neck.
Yeah, you don't see too many men in V-necks.
Yeah. I know. I'm already like,
I don't know. You're doing it okay.
Maybe it's the Hollywood in you.
Should I flex my
You're doing okay with that.
Do I do enough incline work?
I
don't know. That purple shirt the other day looked pretty good.
Hey, I kept that in mind. That's the thing. You compliment a man one time. I'm like, this is my favorite shirt now.
So funny you should say that. I complimented a dude yesterday in here, and like it was about 30 minutes later, I saw him outside the gym. He's like, dude, I just want to tell you totally made my day. And I was like, well, good, man. I'm glad. I was being sincere.
He'll remember that comment for the next 9 years. Yeah,
the guy's been working his ass off, here, and he's been really putting it together. He's been very consistent. It's new for him, which is always the best people to work with in my mind as a coach, because if you can get them consistent and get them just a little bit fired up and get them through that first month, 6 weeks, and they start to see that stuff appear, like that they get to, I guess, enjoy the fruits of their labor, and somebody else is commenting, and when they come unsolicited, man, you can get a lot of mileage with that. Yeah.
This is working.
Especially with the dudes.
It's working.
At the same time, if I really want to fuck with somebody, particularly a coach out there, I'll just be, hey, dude, you okay? You losing weight?
Oh, yeah.
They're just...
It's the worst thing you can say to a man.
It just messes them up so bad.
You're looking lean, man.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you want a cut? You want a cut? It's like, you know? So funny. So it's like the consistency thing just, it's really paying off for a lot of our people around here. We were just talking the other day just on the nutrition side of things, and really how that business for us has really taken off with having Stephen on board and some of the things that we've been doing. I just think people, particularly on the nutrition side, we've talked about how that barrier of entry is a little tougher for people to get into. And they really almost need to be persuaded at some level to get involved with nutrition coaching. As much as they know they need it or that they could get value from it, there's always question. And I think a lot of the question lies in, well, I only have me to blame if this doesn't work out. Like, I really, I'm getting coached, but it's not a reps and sets thing. This is, you could look at it that way, I guess, in terms of reps and sets with your nutrition, but it's really about like anything that happens here, I'm fully responsible for.
Yeah, the coach isn't there at your house or at the restaurant with you. There's a lot more responsibility on the client end.
Yeah, and I've been through this, and I think so people kind of just looking, I've been through it as a coach and I've been through it as a client. In fact, that's how I started in this business. I started as a nutrition client and then moved into coaching. That was my start in this. And I remember wanting to soak up all the knowledge. I was a different person then, and I had different goals than a lot of people do. Mine was very competition based. It was very sports specific to bodybuilding. At the time, I was a young guy. I was like 22 years old, and I'd read voraciously everything I could possibly read. Things are a little different then in terms of the availability of information and where you got it from, more particularly how you got it. There were no interwebs that had, this easy, point and click type of stuff. You had to do a little work. So, inside that though, I guess here's my point. My point is like, as people are like finally maybe making the decision now, I think that just has a lot to do with, you built a little bit more trust, right? We built a little bit more maybe authority and just trust. And like, we're just trying to suggest some things, guys. Like we're not doing this one way. Like there is no one size fits all to any of this. And I hope that's what people get when they listen to the shows. Like we get that. We understand that. There are frameworks that you can work within that work for most people. Not everybody, but they work for a good majority of the people when we take into consideration certain factors. And I think the nuance that happens in there is really what people are starting to get now. And we're starting to see some pretty great things out on the fitness floor, and particularly with the nutrition coaching. I know you got a pretty full book now. And we were just talking the other day, like, again, going back to this guy who's been consistent with regard to his workout programs. And he's been working with Marcus a lot. And Marcus is he is very analytical, right? And in the best kind of way as a coach. Everything is recorded. He's very much keeping track of what those workouts look like. There is a plan of action with flexibility programmed into it based on all kinds of variables. But the takeaway here is like there's a very specific plan, and there's a tracking mechanism to make sure we're making adjustments. We twist this dial, toggle this switch. We're trying to get a little bit here. Oh, this was a little bit tough. Oh, we need a little bit more recovery. Okay, we'll we'll switch this up. That's the art and the business of coaching when it comes to like fitness training. It's the same for nutrition coaching. And the challenges there are is all that stuff happens outside the gym, not in front of the coach.
Mm-hmm.
So, go back to the Marcus situation. Marcus can look at his client and know exactly what's going on. He can get feedback. He can take notes. He can get feedback to make adjustments for the next time and give very specific things to do maybe for homework. But in nutrition coaching, it's much different. We're sitting really on the other end of a phone or a screen, or maybe it's on a couch or, at a chair or desk or whatever. And we're really dependent on getting some recall from the person that's there and trying to put the pieces together and help guide the situation. And so what comes up a lot of times is like, we really need you to track this stuff. And so I think the topic for today is like to track or not to track when it comes to your nutrition, because that brings up all kinds of stuff for people. I think the accountability piece is probably what creates the most amount of resistance. But there's also like an effort and a work piece. Like, I don't really want to do that. Versus, again, in that other situation, the coach is doing a good deal of that. You just got to show up and just do the work, do what you're told. This one's a little different. So again, when we start asking people to track or not track food, that's what I really wanted to talk about today, because I think the general overall, again, no one size fits all, is I think some people should probably be tracking more. And there's people that could probably be tracking a little bit less. But anyway, I'll shut up and kind of turn it over here and just kind of get your feedback or your guys' thoughts on food tracking, right? As it relates to achieving nutrition or dietary success.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I could say that I've reversed my course a little bit, or kind of changed the way I've looked at tracking from when I first got started coaching. I initially was not a huge fan of it because I thought that it was going to create like neuroses in people. I thought it was something that was going to get very low compliance. I didn't have much faith that people were actually going to do it. And if they did do it, they were going to be doing it out of like this like obligation, like I'm assigned this, but I really don't want to do this. This is a pain in the ass. And that's just like not a good place to be in the coach-client relationship. Is I'm just doing this because I'm being told. That really doesn't lend itself to long-term compliance and any kind of sustainability. But when I came on board here, and it was basically, assigned to me, like, hey, this is our process here. And I actually started working with people and getting feedback from them as far as tracking. I think I was able to see it a little bit differently, and now I see it much differently. I think it can become a pain in the ass for people, and it can become something that they feel is a burden and a chore. But if it is framed properly from the get-go as to why we're doing this, and let me explain, I'm not just going to tell you, track your meals because I'm watching, and I'm going to, bust your ass if, you're 100 calories over. It's less about oversight and more about an awareness or mindfulness practice from the clients. And that's what I try to explain from the beginning. Like, hey, you know what? I understand that this is not something that you want to do for, an extended period of time or indefinitely. And I don't want you to do it indefinitely either. But for most people, they really have very little idea of what their intake actually looks like. And a lot of times, you mentioned recall is terrible. People are very selective in what they recall, and that makes it very difficult for me to course correct when I really don't have anything to go off of other than, oh yeah, I eat pretty good. Yeah, I had a salad the other day, and protein. Yeah, I'm getting it in. It's just, it's very vague. It really doesn't give me anything to, make strategic recommendations from. So that data piece is important. But the more important is how it's framed from the beginning. So when I'm getting started with someone and I say, okay, you know what, I'm going to ask you to track what you're consuming. And, you immediately, for some people, get like,
there's resistance,
eye roll, do I really have to, I've tried that before and it wasn't, I don't know how to do it, or, you get all of the resistance. But what I try to impress upon them is this. I don't expect this to be perfect. In fact, I completely expect it to not be perfect. And so just from the beginning, I set that expectation like, hey, I'm not going to come in and jump you
Take some of the pressure off of them.
Yeah, take some of the pressure off and remind them that, this is primarily for you to build some awareness and from some mindfulness around what you're consuming. And even if you are, in the first few weeks, just kind of feeling out the process, kind of it's a little cumbersome for you. You're a little like, oh yeah, I missed a meal here, or I got busy that day, I didn't track. That's okay. And when I have framed it that way, like, hey, this is just, think of this as kind of like a journey of exploration for you, so that you get a sense of portions, so that you get a sense of the caloric density of certain foods, so you get a sense of where you're actually ending up at the end of the day. Because everyone is like, yeah, I eat good. I eat fine. And then when they actually see the numbers, they're like, oh, wow, I was, I'm under eating, or I'm overeating this, or I didn't realize, I was having 5 handfuls of almonds and that was 400 calories or something like that. Most of the feedback I get is actually quite positive, and people are like, oh yeah, you know what? This is like helping me understand my consumption much better.
You mentioned something the other day, and that's just sort of the initial frustration that people find in that tracking process at the beginning of their nutrition journey. Let me just put it this way. It's not even without the tracking, they oftentimes run into frustration about the realities of their situation. If they haven't faced them that, like you just said, you ask 99% of people, go, yeah, I eat good. The reality of it is that is very broad, and that is not specific at all, and relative to whatever, right? There's no
relative to history, relative to how they grow up,
their goals, like all of those things. So there is no like, this is healthy, this is not healthy. These are very like ubiquitous terms. They can kind of go a lot of different directions depending on what context we're talking about it in. So, but that as they come into their nutrition journey and they start to become more aware, that can often be met with, I think the way you put it, the phrase it the other day was like a little bit of frustrated. There's a little bit of almost negativity that comes with that. Like you just said, like, holy shit, maybe like I have been eating 400 calories worth of almonds a day and not really realizing it. Fuck, I suck. I thought I was better than that. Or does this mean I can't have almonds anymore? Like it's kind of like this extreme, like it's either it's a win or it's a loss. It's good or it's bad. It's healthy or it's unhealthy. And they're trying to draw these very absolutes or absolute, I guess, lines without understanding that really the success in your dietary success or success in sort of nutrition is knowing about the gray area and how to play within those areas that work the best for you. And that's the importance of tracking, so that not only do you know maybe where your hard right and left guideline or parameters are. We have here's where you could go all the way to the right, here's where you could go all the way to the left. But more importantly for me is that you understand how to play in the middle, because that is more reality. And without getting, having these realizations, or to your point, I guess the words you specifically used were the awareness and mindfulness around that. It almost makes it always this black and white thing. And that's, I think, the thing that really creates that resistance for people to want to commit to something. And then, as they're not understanding the gray area, and it's also the thing that drives them to latch on to something that's like done for you. Like it's already done versus the DIY. Like, oh, it's right there. It's in black and white. If I just do this, I lose 20 pounds. Or if I just do this, I gain 5 pounds of muscle. And the reality of that is it doesn't work like that either, right? So there's gray areas in that as well. But I guess from an outside looking in, they're not looking at it that way. They're just like, just tell me what to do.
Oh yeah.
And I wish we could. But there's a lot more information we need to gather going back to the tracking. This will be, not only does this put you in a more informed or aware position, it puts me as the coach in the more informed and aware position, so that I can make more informed recommendations or point you in the more informed direction until we get to the next thing. Because again, there is no one size fits all.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the downfall of just tell me what to do is if I just tell you what to do, you're not going to build any type of intuition around this. And that should be the long-term goal of coaching is I want you to be able to do this without having to track. I want you to be able to do this without me around at all. We're trying to create long-term sustainability. And if you just, are getting like, eat this for breakfast, eat this for lunch, eat this for dinner, and you're not thinking beyond just following the instructions, you're not building any kind of intuition that you can use moving forward. And then when the black and white instructions are removed, you're lost.
And then it's like it's one extreme to the other. It's like, oh, fuck it. And you just they throw up their hands. It's like, well, I was on the train, they call it the wagon, the train, whatever, and I just got way off the rails or off the tracks or whatever else. Do you even know what that means? What are the rails? Because again, I never said like you had to do it perfectly. Rails are very specific. You can't get off either way. Otherwise you have catastrophic failure right on a train. I didn't say that. It's more, think of it more as a highway with multiple lanes that you can be in depending on where you may or may not be in your exercise plan, seasonally, what's going on at work, what's going on in life. There are ways to drift in and out of the fast lane to the slow lane and back through the middle. But ideally, you just need to know what lane you're in. If you can identify what lane you're in, then you can make adjustments to what speed should I be moving at and where do I need to get off here and where do I need to get back on.
How much traffic,
Yeah, exactly. How much traffic am I dealing with? All of those things. So if you're overstimulated in the fast lane right now for whatever the reason is, or you find that you're not moving fast enough for the things that are happening around you, well, it's okay to change lanes versus getting off the quote unquote rails. So yeah, you're building this awareness of how to do it for yourself. That's a really important part because again, people you just said like, tell me what to do. Telling you what to do can be very helpful for people right from the get-go.
Especially if they're very overwhelmed, right?
Exactly. So, and I think that's what they're looking for. Like, tell me what to do. Of course, we're going to give you some instruction, but that instruction is going to start with, I need you to tell me what you're doing. And part of that is this tracking piece. Yeah. So you said like you kind of shifted, the important or how you kind of thought about that. And the most important piece is being able to frame it in a way that gets somebody on board. So, if you're out there and you're out there and you're really struggling with your nutrition, or you can be doing better, and there's things that if you think you can be doing better, then that means there's room for improvement, and you'll know the rooms, the pieces of where there is room for improvement when you put them out in front of you, right? Because if it's just like this kind of ambiguous, like I should probably be drinking less, and I should probably be eating a little bit more protein, right? How much less? Right? Yeah. And how much more? Like these are important factors. This is important shit in the big scheme of things, because at the end of the day, depending on your goals, whether it's a performance goal or an aesthetic goal, as I want to lose some body fat, or if it's a longevity goal, I just want to make sure I'm really concerned about my health, my blood markers, and I'm trying to lower my cholesterol and lower my blood pressure and, increase my micronutrient levels and things like that. The details are important.
Yeah.
But we can't even begin to go there until we have a little bit of history here, and history from what were you doing in the last year to what the fuck did you do yesterday? Because all of that adds up and it all matters. So I think there's solutions for people. I think there's some good solutions that we can give people in terms of like, okay, how do I get my head around this, and how do I make sense of this without getting overwhelmed? Because I think there's a lot of fear associated with tracking beyond just the resistance. I guess what I would say is maybe this, like, I think a lot of that resistance is rooted in fear. I think some of it's very legitimate, and I think some of it is maybe
blown out of proportion.
A little blown out of proportion. Yeah. So like the legitimate pieces are, like, oh, this is going to take me some more time, and I'm already pressed for time. And so that time piece, the time thing always
feels
comes
like a
up.
burden. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at the beginning, you're probably going to have to figure out a way to carve out a little bit more time until you get used to the process.
Yeah, just like anything in life, though, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you have to commit to that. Just as much as you're trying to commit to your health, you have to commit to the time that it's going to take to get healthier. And one of those things is like, okay, I've got this new app in front of me, or I'm literally handwriting and journaling it, whatever. I don't care how you do it. I just want you to do it, whatever you're going to feel comfortable with. I do care in the sense that I need details, but I don't care like the medium that you do it on. So there's like apps, there's journals that people do that may write. You may write in. There's things as like specific. I think a really common one is MyFitnessPal.
Yeah.
Most people know about that one. It's been around for a very long time. It's a very user-friendly app. It integrates with a lot of other things, including our customized app that we have here at the gym with our online membership and our online personal training coaching programs that basically upload whatever you're putting into MyFitnessPal into your profile, your client profile for us, so that we can see it all in kind of one place, and so can you too. So all your exercises there, your activities, your and your nutrition intake is there. Just makes it a little bit more convenient. And as long as you're not working with too many, and we did that because we didn't want you working with too many things. Like, let's not put too many things on the, proverbial plate.
Yeah.
Let's do kind of one thing at a time. So I think people freak out a little bit about the time commitment of one, just putting it in there. But two, there's like, you got to measure food.
Yeah.
You have to measure. It's checks and balances here. It's just like your bank account. We've used that analogy before. Like, there's deposits and withdrawals, and you need to know how much you're putting in. You don't just go to the bank and go, I'm just giving you this money today. And they go, okay, well, is it cool if I put you down for $100 when you handed them $500? You're not going to be fucking okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, no, count it.
Yeah.
Right? Right out in front of me, right? Like, count it in front of me. I need to know what that is. I mean, that's maybe a simple analogy, but really that's what it's like. You can't tell me like, yeah, I think I got enough protein in. Well, how much did you get? Like, there are things that we need to do. And as you do this over time, as you were saying, Cece, like, you get used to what this is, so that you don't have to track all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know what 3 ounces of this looks like,
Exactly.
a cup of that looks like, 2 tablespoons of this looks like. Like, the big one's like, do you really know what 2 tablespoons of peanut butter looks like?
Yeah.
Have you ever actually taken
Measured
a
it.
measuring spoon and done and looked at what not just like you take the butter knife and you stick it in there and you go, maybe
or
a little bit
even
more.
your tablespoon that you eat with versus a measured tablespoon.
Much
completely different.
Oh, we have some quote unquote tablespoons in our break room here
those
that
are
are like
massive.
serving spoons back there. Like,
It's a ladle.
Yeah, it's like a ladle. So yeah, that's not an accurate way of measurement. However, if you took out your measuring spoon from your drawer and you compared it against what you could get on your regular spoon that you're probably using every day for preparing your meals and eating off of, then you can make that compare and contrast, and then or at least you're a lot closer than you were of just guesstimating it or eyeballing it.
Yeah, and I think that's also something that I emphasize as well, because I think people, they get into tracking, they're like, well, this needs to be exact. I need to, I need to measure it down to the gram. I need to, measure it down to the ounce. And it's, if I'm not doing it to that precision, then I'm doing it wrong. That's, it's like, no, if you're 90% accurate,
you're doing
90,
awesome.
You're doing well enough.
You're doing really well. That's a
Mm-hmm.
really good. So that leads into the like, what's the resistance and the fear? I think there's a lot of anxiety that people hold with having to track their food, and they've heard things or they see other people that have gotten themselves into situations with their relationship with food or eating and exercise that to them seems and very well could be borderline unhealthy. And in some cases, very unhealthy. And everybody out there, there's not a person listening to this that doesn't know somebody that can relate to what I just said.
Oh, I can relate 100%. I remember being in college and thinking, I didn't have a diagnosed eating disorder, but I had disordered eating.
What's the difference? So let's talk about that. Like, so eating disorder versus disordered eating. Can you talk about that?
An eating disorder is a diagnosed behavioral, relationship that people have with food. It's in the diagnostic statistical manual for mental disorders. So that's where a physician has diagnosed that you have an unhealthy relationship with food. So we're talking about anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa. We're talking about binge eating. So that's like your eating disorder. Disordered eating is, let's say, you know what, I'm going to live off of Mountain Dew and M&Ms, or I'm going to eat just nothing but low-fat food or non-fat foods. And it's where you become very kind of compulsive about that. So it's not technically a diagnosed eating disorder, but you've got disordered eating patterns.
Neither are quote unquote healthy, right? So
Yeah.
So like just because you haven't been diagnosed by a doctor as having one of these very specific things that located in the DSM, like you just mentioned, doesn't mean what you're practicing from a psychological and a physiological perspective is necessarily healthy. But I think these are things that people see from the outside. They know, like you just said, Mountain Dew and M&Ms. Like anybody knows. I hesitate with that because my faith in humanity, as I've said many times, is constantly tested on a daily basis. But everybody knows that eating a diet rich in Mountain Dew and M&Ms is not going to treat their health very well. And so again, there's people from the outside looking in, looking at their friends, looking at their family members, or even looking at themselves with an anxiety or a fear of, like, if I go too deep into this cave of managing my nutrition, right, and tracking things, like how much of this am I putting in versus how much am I not putting in, that puts me in the category of, or could put me in the category of unhealthy, compulsive, and either disordered eating, or bringing me into more of an eating disorder. Keep in mind, like being rigid with your diet and exercise program is very different than being compulsive with your diet and exercise program. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if you have standards and you have this, these right and left parameters that you're trying to stay within, and you make compromises with specifically, like, I'm not going to that social event because I need to work out, or I don't want to miss my workout, or I know that the food and the alcohol thing there is just not my lifestyle. I don't want to go. That is much different than somebody that's doing something very different, which would be like, I am not eating anything because I have to step on the scale tomorrow when I go to the gym, and if I put on a pound, or I've lost a pound for that matter, then that takes me into like this deeper, like spiral, emotional cave where I do more drastic things with my diet or my exercise or whatever else. Those are different things. And I don't think it's hard for people to kind of understand what that is, but I do believe it's hard for people to see other people, and they're in their mind, they're making a judgment call, like, I don't know about that, like this looks a little weird. And in today's day and age, when we're normalizing a lot of unhealthy behaviors, and I mean clinically unhealthy behaviors, not these are the things that are located in the DSM. Like, I'm not making this shit up. I'm not deciding what's healthy and what isn't healthy. That are legit unhealthy behaviors. We're normalizing those things as okay, and we're making that gray area very, very tough to see through. And there's also morality attached to it. That if I attack that, or if I say something about that means my integrity, my person is, I'm compromising that, and that I could be attacked for that. I'm now looked at it as a bad person because I've said that. I'll say it right out loud right here. I have no problem saying it, that obesity is not a good thing. It's very unhealthy.
It is.
You can go through that DSM, excuse me, and you can see all the things that are related to obesity that are clinically unhealthy. So, I'm not saying that because you're obese, you're a bad person. Don't say that because I'm saying obesity is unhealthy, that I'm a bad person. So these are I think the lines that people have a really tough time with when we ask them to track. They're like, oh, that just sounds really obsessive. I know, Stephen, we talked about this a little bit offline, or have in the past, just about like some solutions there, how things are framed, how you put it together. What do you have for us on that?
I mean, as far as alternatives to tracking, or just kind of your perspective and approach on tracking?
Both, I think, because I think that's what people really want to know. Like, because you're not telling me you have to do this, right? It's like, if you don't track, then I'm not working with you. No, we're not doing that. Like, again, that would be completely contradictory to what I've said 3 or 4 times now, which is like, there is no one size fits all. And we have a framework that we work within, which means we have to have different solutions for these different people.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one way, as far as, again, taking some of the pressure off and not positioning the tracking as the end all be all, the way I usually go about it is, we're going to have, as we go through our process together, we're going to have some objective measures of progress and data, and then we're going to have some subjective measures of progress and data as well. So the tracking does provide us with a good objective, if you want to call it black and white, data. And then, here we also have, our body composition scans. So we have that objective measure of progress as well. But that's not going to be our entire focus. I'm not just going to hammer you on your logs our entire session. We're also going to talk about, how are you feeling? How are your clothes fitting? How are you sleeping? How are your energy levels? How are you feeling during your workouts? And I think that helps people find some encouragement if they feel a little, out of sorts with their logs, or if they feel a little bit, I was a little over my calories, or I'm still under eating my protein, or, whatever the case may be. To help people not get so down on themselves about that, we note, have you noticed changes in the mirror? That's progress too. That's great too. You're moving in the right direction. And I want to reinforce that that's also a measure of moving in the right direction. And this is not a who tracks best competition.
Yeah, it's like they're looking at it as like the scoreboard.
Exactly.
Everything's about like, oh God, I got to meet with my coach again and show him my scoreboard. And this is a loss. You've equated this as a loss because you underate your protein for 3 days or something like that. Like you're a total failure for that. Yeah. That is one component of the total score, whatever that is. And the total score should be your health.
Yeah, exactly.
It should be your health and your progress that you're making or not making.
Yeah, and that's just feedback, not failure. That's always important to remember is okay, you are under consuming your protein for a few days. What can we do to bump that up a little bit? I'm not, you're not going to get taken to the woodshed because your protein level, your protein consumption is a little bit down, but I can observe that, maybe this is a little bit challenging for you. Can you tell me, how are you feeling? Do you feel too full? What is the obstacle that you feel is leading to, under consuming protein? I don't know what protein sources to get. I don't, I'm not a big meat eater. What alternatives do I have? And then we talk about those things. So it's feedback. It's not, it's not failure.
You talked about the subjective versus the objective, and the how are we feeling versus like how much protein did you eat? But for somebody that's maybe like very resistant to this, and when I say very resistant, they're just like, nope, I'm not doing that because I've done that in the past, and it was bad for me in the sense, like psychologically and emotionally, I was obsessed with this, and this led me down a very dark path. This is a reality, and I have dealt with plenty of people that have had that. Okay, so what's the alternative? If we're not going to be collecting, information that way, what do you suggest? How do you help clients through that?
The hand size portions, that's another technique that can be utilized. The kind of basic guideline is the size of your palm is a serving of protein. The size of your thumb is a serving of fat. The size of your fist is a serving of vegetables. The size of a cupped palm is a serving of carbohydrates like grains, something like that. So that can be a way to, and then, depending on the person, depending on their needs, do I need 2 servings of protein, 2 servings of vegetable? You play around with the serving count there. So it's certainly not going to be as accurate, but for some people that may be a little bit easier for them to just, I'm not super concerned with precision, but, this is a way that I can sort of still have an idea and a framework.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a point of reference, and it can be consistent. And consistency, just like in most things, in this realm, consistency is extremely important. And so if we can just be consistent for a while, and again, there's transparency and honesty in how we're exchanging that information from client to coach, then we can make some adjustments, in terms of, all right, now it's 1.5 palms of protein instead of, instead of 2 palms full. And no, we're not saying like that palm is 3 ounces. You didn't hear Stephen say that. It was the serving for the person that's intact
to that palm.
to that palm, right? So
yes,
my palm is going to be bigger than Cece's palm. That's my serving versus her serving is different. But those are good ways for people to kind of wrap their head around. Okay, so I'm not having to do numbers and whatever else. Just I know this is how many servings I need to have per day. And so did I eat my 4 to 5 palms of protein today? And if I'm not, let's just be honest about it. I mean, you can measure it in palms if that's what you want. Like I had 4 and I should have had 5. Okay, so we're down 1 palm short per day. How do we overcome that? I mean, people listen to that, sounds like semantics. It is, but it isn't. It's whatever helps a person get to, the finish line, which is understanding what their formula for success is for them so that that can be sustainable for them. However we need to get there, that's what we should be doing. So, you know, the point here is that if without some currency to talk about, right? Again, the deposits and withdrawals, without something, we have really nothing to give you. And then we're just going off feelings or thoughts. And those are important things when we talk about like nutrition, fitness success, health success, things like that. I don't want to discount those. But if you are really committed to making, impactful long-term change, sustainable change that you will now feel like you have some control over, I will tell you, if you're just playing in your head with thoughts and feelings, you have zero control. You will have zero control of this. That is the other thing that I think people fear the most is they don't have control of it and they're not sure how to get their hands around it. And by putting them in control, again, it raises that level of accountability. And then they think that, okay, now I am in control and I should be doing these things. All of a sudden I should be, to your point, perfect. And this is my scoreboard and my scoreboard is telling me that I'm a loser. So it turns into this negative self-talk or this discouragement can kind of set in. But you mentioned the word compliance earlier, and also how you frame the topic of tracking and putting these things together. And I said I think some people need to be tracking more and some people need to be tracking less. Some people can be very obsessive, very compulsive to the point where it becomes like paralysis by analysis. There's too much data, right? They spend more time doing that than they do doing the work, in the first place. But I guess the fear or anxiety component is, listen, hey, my job is to help you find that right formula for you as the coach. And I can only help you. I cannot do it for you. So you have to tell me how you're going to give me this information to help you because it is a two-way street. It is much different than fitness coaching in a lot of ways. Because with the fitness coaching, we know certain things applied to most people. Reps, sets, loads, perceived rate of exertion, things like that will yield very specific results. It's just, it's studied over and over and over again. And, there's you could do that with very little equipment, very little space and all those things. But when you look at nutrition, we're talking about belief systems. We're talking about culture. We're talking about availability of certain things. We're talking about very much more intricate things with regard to like, maybe we're looking at like limitations from a mobility, flexibility, joint or orthopedic issues on the exercise side, but go ahead and multiply that by about 100 in terms of complexity when we start looking at nutrition. So it's even that much more important for you, and if you're working with a coach, for your coach to understand the very specific things that are in there. Again, macronutrient levels, what am I taking in, and how much? Because at the end of the day, like, whether you're trying to lose weight, gain weight, lose body fat, put on muscle, whatever else, there is a calories in versus calories out component here. There is this thing that we call metabolic adaptation. It is very real. And if you don't know where you're starting, how do you know where you're going to? And how do you know when you've reached wherever you're supposed to reach? So there are some hard data that needs to be collected there. So going back to like helping somebody that doesn't, necessarily want to track numbers. You mentioned like, okay, well, here's some portion sizes that we can do. Is there anything else that kind of falls in line there?
I mean, there can be food journaling that doesn't necessarily include portion sizes. I mean, that could be a place to begin, lead us to a place where I'm still kind of guessing,
right?
But at least I have an idea of food choices.
Right.
We can start there. Obviously, how much you're eating of certain foods is going to make a difference. But yeah, my experience with this is actually some people have taken to it. People that I did not think would take to it have actually taken to it and embraced it much more than I thought they would.
Yeah, I think it's because they feel empowered.
Yeah.
They're now they're in control at some level. Again, that can be a slippery slope for some people. But at the same time, I'm not going to sign off on people's bullshit with regard to like, well, I'm just not going to do it because it gives me anxiety. All right, well, we need to work through this because what gives you more anxiety? The high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and let's just say high blood pressure, out of line cholesterol, and you being overweight? Does that give you, do those three things, do those metabolic markers give you more anxiety than tracking your food? Because I think we need to make some compare and contrast about what the realities are and what we might need to toughen up on a little bit and do some things. I am not attacking people's psychological or emotional state about certain things. And they have history, they have things that they've dealt with in the past. I'm not attacking that at all. I'm just asking you to look at the reality. It's the same thing when you're looking at exercise. Like, hey, how many reps and sets do I need? Am I going to the gym today or am I not going to? How many days a week I'm going to do this? This nutrition thing that's the other part is it's all the time. And so it can feel very overwhelming and kind of consume people at times. So again, when you ask them to track and they start to embrace it, it's just like, no, I feel fucking great about this. And by the way, if we're doing a good job as client and coach, results are coming. Mm-hmm. And so you're starting to get those wins. And once you start stacking those wins, sometimes it's tough to slow people down. Then it's like, we have to a lot of times. Like, well, if I just take a few more calories out, hey.
Oh, yeah. That begins to happen as well.
Yeah.
Slow down there.
Yeah, let's pump the brakes. Pump the brakes. We're on a really good path right now. It's a good trajectory, right? Let's not worry about velocity right now. Let's get there. And so that's another thing that I think happens with trackers is people can get a little bit, it's like, well, if taking 250 calories out of my daily intake does this for me, shit, if I took 500 or even 750, it's going to happen twice as fast. That can also be a little bit of again, that slippery slope of tracking for people when they start to see that what we've been telling them about total caloric intake, adjusting macros and things like that, how successful you can be when you do that and how successful you can be when you have that higher level of awareness, which is what we're trying to get them to do or obtain, in the process. Tools, I've seen, like we mentioned MyFitnessPal for this. If you're looking to do that, for super easy, it's a free app. I've seen this app Noom out there, and I've heard people have good success on it. It's more of like a psychology-based app. I think going back to kind of what you were talking about there, anybody that's used that's had some success?
I've run into a few clients who've used Noom. To be honest with you, I don't know exactly how the program is structured, but as you said, it's more of a psychology based, working on people's relationship with food, and maybe allowing them a little bit more flexibility. I have heard that it's not exactly the most customized program. That
it's more cookie cutter.
It is a little bit cookie cutter was some of the feedback that I've gotten, but I have had people tell me that they did see some benefit from it. It sounds like it might be almost more of like entry level, like maybe somebody who's not quite ready for real, like one-on-one personalized coaching, but they need a little bit of help, or they want to, dip their toes in a little bit. So as far as how sustainable the changes people have made are, that is kind of up for debate. But I have had some experience with it.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of people talk about it, and that they, like a husband wife, like a wife was on it, husband wasn't. Both of them were on it, and the wife did really well on it, and found that it was really helpful for her, and husband, not so much. And again, I think it's based on. Yeah. So we're just going back to the individuality of all this. It's kind of based on personal needs. But I do, in personality types and, capability and awareness, all of that plays in. But I think the big takeaway there is it's AI generated stuff. It's very, we've used the word cookie cutter. Let's just say it's more algorithmic versus working on your personal things or very, very personal things. Yes, you're going to answer a questionnaire and it's going to dump some things in there. But again, it's just collecting that data into an algorithm, and it's giving you some feedback based on that. We know how good at some algorithms can be, but again, you're an individual. And that's something to keep in mind when we're looking at, like, if you have a specific goal or specific need, specific challenge, these types of things may not work that great for you. But to your point about dipping your toes in the water, I think a lot of people try and do that with nutrition. It's like, oh, I'm going to go try this diet over here. I'm going to go do whatever. We've talked about these before. Like, I'm going to go do keto, right? I'm going to go do that for a while. Right. And they do that.
Pull a diet out of the hat.
Yeah. Something.
Or
right.
Because their friends doing it.
Their friends are doing it. Susie's doing this diet down there. She lost fucking 5 pounds. I'm all over that shit. Right. So I'm going to go down there. I'm going to do that for now. And so there's this back and forth, and to your point, like, they've subscribed to a tribe or to a particular diet, and they haven't learned anything outside of how to do that very specific thing, whatever that is. Assuming or with assuming that that is going to be the thing that will solve their problem, like they're versus trying to solve the problem on their own through their own path. And again, that's a much bigger task. But again, if you're going to do that, then you need to have a higher level of awareness of what exactly you are doing, so that you know a little bit better about what you exactly need to do to improve that. I think, in terms of this, like what might be the best approach for you, there's a lot of different tools that you can use to kind of figure out how to make all this work for you. And again, we mentioned the apps. There are some pitfalls with some of these apps, like MyFitnessPal. One of the functions on there in particular is where it basically counters your movement for the day against your total caloric intake. I would turn that function off, right? So it says you have this many calories left based on the activity that we've calculated to do today. It's bad for a lot of reasons, but a couple of them. One, it's making an estimation of your caloric burn for the day with very little data, and again, these are algorithms or actuated values that it's putting in there that are probably not very accurate. I would stay away from that. It also doesn't build consistency, because if you had an exercise day versus a non-exercise day, your body still needs those calories. We can start adjusting calories later down the road in terms of cycling calories in and out. That's a little bit more advanced technique.
Cycling calories, cycling macros.
Macro cycling, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, most people, they're not ready for that.
Mm-mm.
I would turn that function off. Still want to track your activity in those apps, track your activity in there, it's fine, or connect it to your other wireless devices if they have your wearables and stuff. But I would stay away from that if you're getting onto their tracking train. Just simply put in your intake for the day.
What's going in? Yeah.
What's going in? And just, that's it. That's the goal. Like it'll calculate for you like what your, if you wanted to lose X amount of pounds in X amount of time, it's going to give you a caloric goal. Mm-hmm. I think it's part of the profile setup. Don't even look at that to start. Like, don't mess with that. This is making assumptions. There's a lot of assumptions, probably some pretty poor ones being made by the app. And again, we're talking about recall and realities and things like that. If you're dumping numbers in, just track your damn food and just see where it comes out. And it's really easy. I mean, the database there is so massive. It's just like typing in like a handle into like Instagram. I get
it'll get you
the B and the E next, and I get all the different beef, all the different cuts, everything else. You just tap. Make sure you got the right numbers or the right amounts. Again, measuring is a thing. We can talk about that for a second, and then the other part of it is what you'll find is you tend to kind of eat the same things. So you have functions in there that you can basically just pre-program a meal. Like, this is what I have every day for breakfast. So I don't have to put it in every day. I just choose that meal that goes in there.
Copy and paste.
Yeah, copy and paste it effectively. So there's ways you will learn this as you get into there to make it more efficient. But going back, like, it's going to take a little time. Yeah. So play with that. Get yourself a really cheap scale. Like, I think we've got them laying around. We've got a couple at the house. We've got one here in the break room. I think we got them from Target. They're like $20.
Yeah, $20.
A digital scale, super grams, ounces.
It's as accurate as you need it to be.
Yeah, it's exactly. You just, if it becomes a habit for you, it's like, it's funny. We grill most nights during the week. There's the proteins coming off the grill that we eat for lunches the next day or whatever. And Cece's like, how much protein you need? She's like, I need 5 ounces, and I'll cut the thing off and I'll stick it on. I'm pretty good at guesstimating now. It's like 5.5.
Yeah.
She's like, she looks at me, right? I look at her. I go, okay. So I shave off a little bit. It's 5.1, okay?
It's like when you're at the butcher at the grocery store or whatever. And let me get 3/4 of a pound. Is 9/10 of a pound?
Yeah.
No, it's not actually.
No. Yeah, so it's turned into a little bit of a game. But you're going to want to do that if you're trying to be a little bit more accurate. But, again, otherwise you're just dumping guesstimates into the thing, and in which case, like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. You want to be as accurate you can. The whole point of tracking and doing the work is to have a really high level of understanding of what it is you aren't doing. Do that for 3 to 5 days, maybe longer. And then have a look at your history and kind of see where you are. There's a lot of information you can glean from doing this. Those habits, that awareness, that mindfulness. Oh shit, I'm having way more glasses of wine per week than I was giving myself credit for. And a glass for me is like, each glass is more like 2 glasses because I've got those ridiculous,
cartoon size.
Yeah, cartoon size glasses at home, whatever. You can do that. There's other tools. We have the TDEE guide. That is the your total daily energy expenditure guide, how to calculate that. Also how to calculate out, some estimated macro ratios for you, depending on what your goal is. We've given you some stuff. If you go to rdfguides.com, you can find that there. If you go to RDF Train Online, or when you get to the guides page, if you just go there, just go up to the menu and look at the different nutrition coaching services that we have. You could get involved in a couple different ways. If you are a DIY type of person, but you need some structure and you're like a problem solver, you like solving things for yourself, and you've maybe done some tracking, you have a little bit more history, with your diet. So there's a little bit higher level of awareness. Then, maybe you check out our Fuel You program, which it's a 30-day program. That program allows you to work through at your own pace. We call it a 30-day program. You could take as long as you need to get through it. We just, we find that most people have the most success when they really commit to doing the daily work. And what that looks like is it's really 4 weeks. We give you a guide that it's available like digitally, or you could print it out. And there's video tutorials as you go through there with the different sections. And think about it this way: we call it Fuel You, like Fuel University or Fuel Yourself. You're going to start in your first week. We're going to talk about, you're going to get into the history piece. Like, what have I been doing? Where am I now? And how do those things, play into what I'm trying to do? And part of that is the tracking. So then we get into the math, right? So you go through history, then you're going to get into a little bit of math. Again, TDEE, macro calculation, figuring out kind of how are the scales balancing here. And then you'll get into a little bit of the science behind, okay, now that I have this stuff, how do I make it work for me? And then lastly, you're going to get into the psychology and mindset, mindfulness piece. And people are like, yeah, I don't really need that shit. It's probably one of the more impactful pieces of the program, because now you have all of this stuff and you're really motivated, and you've gotten through, a few weeks of this stuff, and like, yeah, you're probably feeling good and seeing some changes. But what are you going to do? How are you going to feel in 6 months? How are you going to feel in 3 more weeks when you start to run into little roadblocks and things like that? So Fuel You is that self-guided, done for you / do-it-yourself program, but it's really about solving for your own nutritional success kind of on your own. And the last thing there obviously would be the one-on-one coaching that you can get involved with, which is for that person that's like, look, I've done this before and I really need some specific direction here, or I don't have the bandwidth in my soul, my brain, or in my heart to get through this on my own. I know that I've tried this before and I need some specific help, in which case you can reach out and we'd be happy to help you. So there's you can get a free consultation.
You don't have to be in studio for this either.
Yeah, you don't have to be in studio.
You can be anywhere in the world.
Yeah, Stephen will, or you can schedule an appointment directly with Stephen, talk to you. And
let me know. We'll talk.
Yeah, hopefully point you in the right direction.